Reina Ortiz caught the wrist before the slap could land. It wasn't a heroic motion. It wasn't even fast. She simply stepped out from beside the luggage cart and closed her hand around Camille Ashworth Vance's wrist, the way you'd catch a glass tipping off a counter. Reflexive, unthinking, already too late to take back. The lobby of the Wexford Grand went quiet in the particular way marble buildings go quiet. A silence with edges, amplified by chandeliers and polished stone. The night doorman froze mid-step. A guest near the elevator bank lowered her phone without finishing the photo she'd been taking. Even the fountain at the center of the lobby seemed to hold its breath between trickles. The hand wrapped around Camille's wrist did not belong to a manager. Did not belong to security leadership, or a Vance cousin, or anyone whose name appeared on an org chart that mattered. It belonged to the night auditor. 23 years old. 3 weeks into the job. Cardigan thrown over her uniform because the lobby air conditioning never once adjusted to actual human temperature. "Not in front of me," Reina said. 4 words. They landed like 5. The bellhop she'd stepped between, Dante, 19, still growing into a uniform jacket a size too big, stood frozen with his hands half raised, like he'd been bracing to absorb the blow rather than dodge it. His eyes moved from Camille to Reina and back, uncomprehending. People didn't intervene here. Not for him. Not for anyone like him. Camille recovered her voice first. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly what you were about to do." Reina's grip didn't loosen. That answer was somehow worse than silence. Behind them, near the revolving doors, Julian Vance, heir to the hotel, Camille's fiancé, a man whose face had anchored 3 magazine covers in the past year for redefining hospitality with heart, stood with his keycard still in his hand, having just walked in from a late dinner. He'd caught the last 3 seconds of it. The raised hand, the catch, the silence that followed. Nobody breathed, because one question moved through the lobby like static electricity. Who was this girl, and why wasn't she afraid? Camille Ashworth Vance was, by any public measure, beloved. She'd funded a youth shelter renovation in the Bronx and sat on 2 nonprofit boards. A glossy profile had once called her the new face of old money, with a conscience. She arrived at Gallus in couture worth more than most of the Wexford staff made in a year, and she smiled for every camera like she meant it, every time. Inside the building, the staff knew a different version of her. Housekeepers worked doubles with no overtime because, as she put it, the Vance family doesn't believe in clock watching. Valets parked cars in driving rain without rain gear, because umbrellas ruined the look of the entrance. Front desk staff learned fast never to let her wait more than 90 seconds at check-in, because the 91st second came with consequences that landed on someone else's schedule, never on hers. Nobody complained. Jobs in this city were jobs, and Camille was 3 months from becoming Mrs. Vance, which made her something closer to permanent weather than a person you could file a complaint against. On Reina's first night, an older clerk had pulled her aside by the time clock. "If she's rude, you say nothing back. If she's wrong, you let her be wrong out loud and you stay quiet. Whatever you do," he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Don't get between her and whoever she's mad at." Reina had nodded. She'd meant to listen. She'd transferred from a Queens property 6 weeks earlier. After her younger brother's knee needed a surgery, the insurance company called elective and everyone else in the family called necessary. She needed the graveyard differential the Wexford paid. She needed it enough to keep her head down and her opinions to herself. She'd almost managed it, too, until the night she watched Camille make a housekeeper kneel on the marble to scrub a wine stain by hand. So it doesn't happen twice, while 4 guests stood and watched and did absolutely nothing. Reina had gone into the back office afterward, gripped the edge of the desk, and made herself a promise she never said aloud: she would survive this job. She would swallow the rudeness and the unfairness and the long unpaid hours, but she would not stand still while someone got destroyed in front of her. Not again, whatever again had meant to her once. Not while she had a choice in the room. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday. A jewelry case, insured for an amount larger than the hotel's weekly payroll, had gone missing from Camille's suite, and she came down to the lobby already certain of who'd taken it, the way people get certain when they've decided someone's guilt before they've located any evidence. She lined up every bellhop on shift like it was an interrogation, heels striking marble with the rhythm of a verdict already reached. Her eyes landed on Dante. You carried my bags up tonight. You're the only one who had hands on that case. I set it on the dresser, ma'am. I never opened it. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying, he said, and made the mistake of staying calm while he said it. Her hand came up. That was when Raina moved. Camille's wrist slipped free of Raina's grip the instant a second voice cut across the lobby. Is this how we treat staff at this property? Margaret Whitfield, general manager of the Wexford Grand, stood near the concierge desk with the stillness of someone who had already decided how the night would end and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up to her. Camille recalibrated in real time, shock folding into wounded composure, composure folding into a reasonable explanation. This is a misunderstanding, she said, smoothing the front of her coat. A piece of my jewelry has gone missing. I was handling it by raising your hand. You know how these things look worse than they are. Camille glanced around the lobby. Housekeepers, the night doorman, 2 front desk clerks who suddenly found the carpet fascinating, daring anyone to contradict her version. Nobody did. They never had. Julian finally found his voice thinner than the one on the magazine covers. Camille, what's going on? My case, baby. My jewelry case is missing. I was just trying to handle it before it turned into a bigger problem. Handle it. The same phrase that had quietly buried a dozen complaints before this one ever reached a lobby full of witnesses. Margaret wasn't moved by it. Pull the hallway footage from this afternoon. Camille stiffened. There's no need for that. There's every need. The footage took 11 minutes to retrieve. In that time, nobody in the lobby said a single word, which was its own kind of statement. When it finally played on the office monitor, the timestamp told the truth before anyone needed to interpret it for her. Camille's own assistant. 3 hours earlier, carrying the jewelry case down to hotel security for safekeeping, at Camille's own request. A request she'd apparently forgotten the second she couldn't find the case again. It had never left the building. It had never been anywhere near Dante's hands at all. Camille's face drained, then hardened just as fast. This doesn't change what happened in that lobby, she snapped, turning on Raina. She grabbed me, in public, in front of guests. Julian looked at Raina properly for the first time all night, like he was seeing an actual person instead of a uniform behind a desk. Why did you do it? Raina swallowed. He was about to get hit for something he didn't do. I wasn't going to watch that happen and stay quiet. Not again. The lobby went very still. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered behind a hand. It wasn't rebellion, and everyone in the room seemed to understand that at the same moment. It was just true. Camille's composure cracked at the edges. If you let staff talk to me like this, you lose control of this entire property. Or, Margaret said, flat as a closed door, we finally get some standards back. Before Camille could answer, the revolving doors spun, admitting a man in a rumpled blazer, breathing hard in the specific way that comes from running the last 2 blocks, not walking them. Camille. His voice cracked on her name. Please. Not again. The lobby's stillness deepened into something colder. Julian turned. Who is this? My uncle, Camille said too fast. He doesn't need to be here. Not again, Julian repeated slowly, turning each word over like it might mean something different the second time. What does that mean? The uncle, Walter Ashworth, semi-retired, the family's longtime fixer for things that never made it into print, looked around the lobby like a man realizing the room he'd just entered had no exits left for him either. There was a girl, he said. 5 years ago. At the Pierpont property. Camille's voice sharpened to a warning. Walter, stop talking. He didn't. She was accused of theft. Just like tonight. Camille said the girl had embarrassed her in front of investors and needed to be taught a lesson. Margaret folded her arms slowly. Go on. The accusation went out before anyone checked it. The girl was walked out in front of the whole staff. 19 years old. First real job out of community college, sending half of every paycheck home. Walter's hands were shaking now. Her name was Priya. She lost the work-study placement her scholarship depended on. Her family didn't believe her side of it. Not at first. Not when corporate's version was already in print. He stopped, started again. By the time the leaves changed that year, she was gone. Just and gone. There wasn't a sentence anyone could say that brought her back to herself. The fountain seemed loud in the silence that followed. Nobody asked him to clarify what he meant. Nobody wanted him to. Julian's face had gone the color of the marble underfoot. You knew about this. I made it disappear, Walter said. That's what I do for this family. That's all I've ever done. Camille's eyes had gone wild, cornered. She was fragile. That's not my fault. People who can't handle a little pressure. Don't, Margaret said. One word, made of ice. That's when the gate alarm sounded, sharp, electronic, rang in a lobby built for soft chimes and a string quartet on weekends. A radio crackled at the security desk. Every head turned toward the entrance. A man stood at the revolving doors, calm in the specific way grief settles once it has already burned through every louder version of itself. He didn't look furious. He looked like a man who was finally done waiting. Are you the owner of this hotel? He asked Julian. My father is. I'm effectively, yes. Then you should hear this. Camille took a step back. Raina, without deciding to, took a step sideways. Not toward Camille, just into the space between her and the door. Not aggressive. Just present. The same way she'd been present for Dante an hour earlier. My name is Marcus Cole, the man said. 5 years ago, you destroyed my sister's life over a watch that turned up in a lost and found bin 3 days after she was fired. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Her name was Priya. She wanted to be an interior architect. She used to redesign our apartment in a notebook because we couldn't afford the magazines. Camille's breathing had gone shallow and audible. She called me the night she got that placement. Happiest I'd heard her sound in years. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then she called me again. Couldn't get a full sentence out. Said a woman made her stand in front of the entire floor and called her a thief in front of people she respected. That's not... Camille started. She stopped sleeping, Marcus said over her. Stopped applying anywhere, because the story followed her into every interview. Every reference came back with the same 2 words attached to her name. Theft allegation. He looked at Camille directly now, finally. And by the time anyone found that watch sitting in a drawer where someone else had left it, it didn't matter to her anymore. The damage was already done to a person who couldn't survive being called a liar by someone richer than God. He didn't elaborate on what happened after that. He didn't need to. The room understood the shape of the silence well enough, and nobody asked him to fill it in further. I'm not here for revenge, Marcus said quietly. I'm here because I want this said once, out loud, in front of people who can't pretend afterward that they didn't hear it. Margaret turned to hotel security. Call the police. Now. You can't, Camille said, her voice cracking for the first time all night. Do you understand how many people this family employs? How many of you would be out of a job without us? Nobody answered her. That's when her phone, still sitting in her clutch where she'd set it down to gesture more freely, lit up on the concierge desk. A message preview flashed across the locked screen, visible to anyone standing close. And in a lobby this silent, everyone was close. Julian picked it up before he could stop himself. Camille lunged for it, a half-second too late. The notifications kept stacking once the screen woke. Wedding logistics. A line about a vendor. And then a voice memo that auto-played at full volume the instant his thumb brushed it by accident. Camille's own voice. Light and amused, recorded weeks earlier. Once I'm Mrs. Vance. None of them can touch me. That's the whole point of the ring. Julian stood holding the phone like it had grown heavier in his hand in the last 3 seconds. When he finally spoke, there was nothing left in his voice at all. It's over, Camille. Her knees buckled before he'd finished the sentence. Sirens were already audible through the revolving doors, growing louder, arriving before the officers actually did. As she was let out, Camille looked back, not at Margaret, not at Julian, not at Marcus. At Raina, something between hatred and disbelief. Raina didn't smile. She didn't need the moment to feel like a celebration. She just stood there, steady, until the doors closed behind the last officer and the lobby exhaled all at once, like it had been holding the same breath since the slap that never landed. Weeks later, the Wexford Grand felt different in ways that wouldn't show up on any guest survey. Overtime got paid on time. Housekeeping got real breaks between rooms. Margaret put in an anonymous reporting line that staff actually believed someone would read. Dante got moved to a daytime shift with a small raise. Nobody made a show of announcing. There was no plaque. No press release thanking the night auditor who'd stopped a hand before it landed. Raina never asked for one. She was at her desk one slow Tuesday near 4 in the morning when Julian's father, Edwin Vance, the hotel's founder, a man who rarely came downstairs before sunrise, stopped at the counter on his way through the lobby. "My late wife used to tell me something," he said, not quite looking at her, like the memory needed somewhere else to land besides her face. "She said the people worth trusting are never the loudest ones in the room. They're the ones who move first and explain later, if they explain at all." Raina didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Edwin nodded once as if her silence had answered him anyway, and walked on toward the elevators. She went back to her ledger. Outside, the city kept moving the way it always did, indifferent, relentless, unimpressed by quiet courage. But inside the lobby, for the first time since she'd started the job, the air didn't feel like it was holding its breath. It just felt like air.